Why did Methuselah live for 969 years? Is it merely a curious fact from the Bible, or does it hold a deeper, hidden purpose? What you are about to hear might forever change your perspective on faith. While many overlook this detail, his longevity was no coincidence. It was a clear sign of God's patience and a message that still resonates with our lives today. What was his connection to Noah and the great flood? What did God intend to teach us through this extraordinary man? Uncover the astonishing secret behind his story and see how it can transform your relationship with the Creator. Join our community of faith and transformation. Like the video and subscribe to stay tuned for our next inspiring stories. In a world where time seemed to rush by, one man stood out as an eternal mystery. Methuselah, known for living 969 years, was not just a number in a biblical genealogy. He was a living testament to God's power and plans. From the moment of his birth, his presence raised questions among those who knew him. Why would someone live for so long? What purpose lay behind his extraordinary lifespan? These questions lingered in his mind and in the minds of those who shared his era. Methuselah was not like others. His steps were slow but steady, as if he understood that every step was part of a greater plan. His eyes reflected a wisdom that did not belong to an ordinary man. He had seen generations come and go, witnessed corruption and decay consuming the pre-flood world. Yet he had also experienced moments of peace and hope, cherishing each day as a divine gift. From a young age, Methuselah felt his life had a special meaning. His father, Enoch, had been taken by God, leaving a profound mark on his heart. Enoch's story of a man who walked with God became the foundation of Methuselah's faith. His father had taught him that life was a precious gift, meant to be lived in obedience to the Creator. But as the years passed, Methuselah began to wonder, why was he chosen to live so long? In his reflections, he found solace in the starry nights, gazing at the infinite sky. "What is my place in your plan, Lord?" he would often ask in prayer, with humility and awe. He often felt the wind carried answers, soft whispers that calmed his restless soul. Wait and see. Methuselah's life was a paradox. While his body aged more slowly than others, his heart bore the weight of centuries. But he knew his time on earth was no mere accident. It was an opportunity to witness God's plans. And so, as the generations around him changed, he remained a beacon of faith and patience in a world slowly falling apart. As Methuselah pondered the meaning of his existence, he could not help but recall his father, Enoch, whose teachings had planted the seeds of his faith and shaped his understanding of divine purpose. In the quiet village where Methuselah spent his childhood, the memory of Enoch was a priceless treasure. Enoch was no ordinary man. His life had been marked by an unparalleled closeness to God, a relationship so pure and profound that he was taken away without experiencing death. This extraordinary event became the foundation of Methuselah's beliefs, and he often wondered if he could one day walk with God as his father had. From an early age, Enoch instilled in Methuselah the importance of faith and obedience. They would often sit under the old tree in the center of the village, where Enoch would recount stories of creation, humanity's fall, and the promise of redemption. "My son," he would say, with a voice both firm and loving, "our time on earth is brief, but every act of faith leaves an eternal mark. Walk with God, and he will guide you." These words left a deep impression on young Methuselah, who found comfort in his father's wisdom. But the day Enoch vanished changed everything. It was a clear day, and Enoch had gone out for his usual walk. Villagers saw him heading toward the hills, but he never returned. News spread quickly. "God has taken him," they said in awe and reverence. For Methuselah, his father's absence was a deep wound, but also a constant reminder of God's closeness. In the years that followed, Methuselah worked tirelessly to honor Enoch's memory, embracing the teachings he had left behind. During his moments of prayer, Methuselah sought the same connection with the Creator, hoping that, like his father, he could find a purpose beyond the earthly realm. Memories of Enoch not only offered him comfort, but also guidance during times of uncertainty. Whenever Methuselah faced doubts or fears, he recalled his father's words. God does not seek perfection, he seeks willing hearts. Stay faithful, my son, and he will do great things through you. Indeed, these words echoed in his mind, giving him the strength to face life's challenges. In the darkest days of his life, Methuselah began to feel that his longevity was no accident, but an integral part of a divine plan. This conviction led him to seek answers through a life of prayer and meditation, trusting that God would reveal his purpose in due time. Methuselah, now a man of countless years, came to understand that his longevity was more than a blessing. It was a sacred burden. With each passing decade, he felt himself becoming a living witness to God's designs and a guardian of knowledge that few could imagine. He often wondered if the secrets he carried in his heart were meant to be revealed someday, or if he was destined to take them with him to the end of his days. There were nights when he would sit alone under the starry sky, meticulously writing on scrolls. The words he penned spoke of the wonders he had witnessed, the changes in generations, and the corruption slowly consuming humanity. Methuselah also wrote about God's patience, which had allowed the world to persist despite its growing wickedness. But hidden between the lines of his writings were clues, a message that only the wise could decipher. "Lord, what do you want from me?" he often asked in his prayers. In those moments of deep meditation, he felt the Spirit of God whispering to his heart, "Wait and watch." Although he didn't fully understand his purpose, Methuselah's faith was unwavering. He knew that his life was a crucial piece in a plan far beyond his comprehension. As the centuries passed, Methuselah began to notice patterns in the events unfolding around him. Families were breaking apart, cities descended into chaos, and people drifted further and further from God. Despite his warnings, few listened. "The world is corrupted," he once wrote on one of his scrolls, "but God is patient and his judgment is just. However, the day of his justice is drawing near." In a moment of inspiration, Methuselah felt compelled to share some of the knowledge he had accumulated with his grandson, Noah. Though generations passed swiftly, Noah stood out as a righteous man in a corrupt world. Methuselah saw in him a spark of hope, an echo of Enoch's teachings that had endured through the years. But even as Methuselah tried to guide his family, he could not ignore the weight of the responsibility he bore. His heart was heavy with an unsettling certainty. The time of divine patience was running out, and the day of judgment was closer than ever. As the centuries went by, Methuselah became a silent observer of humanity. His days were filled with prayer, meditation, and profound sorrow as he watched each successive generation drift further from God. The world he had known as a young man, filled with hope and promises, had transformed into a dark place where corruption and violence reigned unchecked. Walking through the villages and cities that rose and fell over time, Methuselah tried to warn those who would listen. His voice, filled with wisdom and urgency, was like an echo in the wilderness. "Turn your hearts to God before it's too late," he would plead. Yet more often than not, his words fell on deaf ears. People looked at him with disdain or even mocked him, unable to grasp the seriousness of his warnings. Once, a group of young men confronted him in a public square. "What do you know about the future, old man?" They jeered with laughter. Methuselah, with a calmness that only age could bestow, replied, "It is not my words you should fear, but the day when the Lord judges the world. I am merely a witness." But his warnings were dismissed, and the group dispersed, leaving the elder alone in the square. Methuselah's heart broke more with each passing generation. He watched as men abandoned their faith, replacing it with idolatry, selfishness, and carnal desires. Despite his efforts, few seemed willing to change. Only in Noah, his grandson, did he find a glimmer of hope. Noah was a righteous man, steadfast in his faith, and Methuselah saw in him a promise that Enoch's teachings had not been forgotten. One night, gazing at the moon from a nearby hill, Methuselah turned to God with a heart full of questions. "Lord, why do you let me live so long when no one listens? What is the purpose of my existence?" In the silence that followed, he felt an inexplicable peace. Though the answers didn't come, he knew his mission was not yet complete. The years continued to pass, and Methuselah remained a faithful witness. Each sunrise was an opportunity to speak of God's mercy, even as the darkness of the world seemed to deepen. He knew that the time of divine patience was nearing its end, but he also trusted that God would fulfill his perfect plan. In those dark days, Methuselah decided to dedicate his time and wisdom to Noah, who not only listened to him, but also shared his faith. Between them, a bond was forged that would change the course of history. In a world sinking deeper into corruption, Methuselah found in Noah a glimmer of hope. Despite the challenges he faced, Noah stood firm in his faith, living according to God's teachings. Methuselah, who had witnessed generations lose themselves in darkness, recognized in his grandson a willing and righteous heart, a man different from the rest of his generation. Many times, grandfather and grandson would sit together by a river that flowed through the nearby lands. Methuselah, speaking with a calm and wise tone, shared the stories of Enoch and the lessons he had passed down. "Noah," he would say, "the world may seem like a lost place, but as long as there is one who remains faithful, God will not forget his people." Noah listened intently, engraving every word in his heart. One day, as they watched the water flow gently, Methuselah took on a more serious tone. "Difficult times are approaching, Noah," he said. "God will not tolerate man's wickedness forever. You have been called for something great, and you must be ready." Though these words filled Noah with unease, they also gave him certainty. His life had a divine purpose. The relationship between Methuselah and Noah deepened over time. Methuselah shared with him not just stories, but also his unwavering faith and understanding of God's plans. He taught Noah how to discern God's voice amid chaos, to trust that divine justice would prevail even when all seemed lost. When God spoke to Noah and gave him instructions to build an ark, Methuselah was one of the first to support him. Though extremely advanced in age, his spirit remained vibrant. He helped Noah organize materials and encouraged him to continue, even when people from nearby villages mocked them. "Obedience to God always bears fruit," Methuselah would tell him. "Do not fear men, for it is the Lord who has given you this task." As time passed, Methuselah began to feel the weight of his years, but his heart was filled with peace as he witnessed Noah's dedication. He knew that his legacy would not end with him, but would live on through his grandson, who had been chosen for an extraordinary mission. Methuselah, a witness to centuries of history, now prepared for the day his time on earth would come to an end. In the final days of his life, Methuselah felt a deep certainty. The flood was near. As he gazed at the ark under construction, he prayed that God would strengthen Noah and guide him in the days ahead. The day Methuselah had long felt approaching finally arrived. It was the year of his death, and the year God's judgment would be unleashed upon humanity. Divine patience had reached its limit, and the words Methuselah had spoken for centuries were now materializing before his eyes. The ark, that immense wooden structure built by Noah and his family, stood as a monument to obedience and faith. Methuselah watched his grandson work tirelessly, gathering animals and fine-tuning the ark's final details. Though his body was weakened by the weight of years, his heart was at peace. He knew he had fulfilled his purpose to prepare Noah for this monumental task. Every moment spent by his grandson's side was a mix of farewell and gratitude. In his final days, he gathered his family to share his parting words. With a voice that, though frail, carried firmness, he said, "God has always been faithful, even when the world chose the path of wickedness. You are here because he has called you to be light in the darkness. Do not fear what is to come, for the Lord is with you." Tears filled the eyes of his children and grandchildren as they listened to Methuselah speak with the certainty of a man who knew his Creator deeply. The last sunrise of his life was serene. Methuselah sat before the ark, contemplating its magnitude and the symbolism of what it represented. "Lord," he whispered, "thank you for allowing me to witness your plans. Now, I am ready to rest." He closed his eyes for a moment, and his spirit was filled with a peace that could only come from God. That day, Methuselah departed from this world, leaving behind a legacy of faith and perseverance. His death marked the beginning of a drastic change in the history of humanity. Shortly after his passing, the doors of the ark closed, and the first drops of rain began to fall. It was the beginning of the flood, the judgment promised by God. Inside the ark, Noah and his family reflected on Methuselah's words. Though the roar of the waters grew, their faith remained steadfast, remembering that it was God who guided and sustained them through the storm. Methuselah's life had been a testimony to divine patience, but also a warning that judgment would come to fulfill God's justice. As the waters covered the earth, Methuselah's memory remained alive in the hearts of Noah and his family. His life had now become a legacy carried through the generations, always reminding them of the importance of walking with God. The flood transformed the world. The waters that engulfed the earth brought a new era, a fresh beginning. Inside the ark, Noah and his family looked at the clear skies after months of storms. The roar of the waters had subsided, and now a rainbow shone on the horizon, a reminder of God's promise. Yet in their hearts, one figure remained alive: Methuselah. Methuselah's words echoed in Noah's thoughts. During the long nights in the ark, he shared with his children the teachings his grandfather had passed down to him. Faith is not just believing in times of peace, Noah would say. It's walking with God even when all seems lost. For Noah, Methuselah's life was a testimony of patience, obedience, and trust in the Creator. When the doors of the ark finally opened and they stepped onto dry land, Noah built an altar to thank God. As the flames of the sacrifice rose to the heavens, his prayer included a special acknowledgement of his grandfather. "Lord, thank you for the life of Methuselah, who was a beacon of your light in the midst of darkness. May his example remain with us as we begin this new journey." Over time, Noah's descendants multiplied, and Methuselah's stories were passed down from generation to generation. To Noah's children, their great-grandfather was much more than an old man of long years. He was the one who had prepared the way for their family and had been a faithful witness to God's plan. In their hearts, his legacy lived on as a reminder that faithfulness to God always bears fruit, even when it is not immediately seen. Years passed, and though Methuselah's name became part of ancient stories, his influence remained alive. He was mentioned in family tales as a man who walked with patience and humility, trusting God despite adversity. In every story, the generations that followed found inspiration to face their own challenges, knowing that the same God who guided Methuselah was also with them. The rainbow Noah and his family saw after the flood became a symbol of hope, but also of memory. It was a reminder that divine patience has its limits, but his faithfulness is eternal. Methuselah's life, with its 969 years, was a representation of both truths: God's infinite mercy and his perfect justice. Conclusion: the story of Methuselah was etched not only in scripture but also in the hearts of those who inherited his faith. His life teaches us that each day on earth is an opportunity to walk with God, leaving an eternal legacy that inspires others to follow the same path. Now that you know the incredible story of Methuselah and the profound meaning behind his life, I ask you, what legacy are you leaving? His example invites us to reflect on our faith, our mission, and our connection with God in a world full of challenges. Don't let this reflection end here. Help spread this message further. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear these words, and leave us a comment so we can continue growing together in faith. And remember, this is just the beginning. Every week we share inspiring stories that transform lives. Subscribe now and join our community of faith and hope. See you in the next video.